Thank you for inviting me to be the keynote speaker today. I'm from the aviation world. What I'm going to talk to you today is how passion and innovation make a difference and how they really matter. I'm going to talk to you about a few aspects of communicating what a brand stands for and differentiating a brand. It's not so much about internal communications, but I'm hoping that there is something in here that is useful to all of us. All right, so typically when I speak, I don't use slides, but I was told that it would be good if I actually submitted something in advance just to make sure that it's on topic. And when I do use slides, I use a lot of pictures. However, the first couple of slides have some text. Please bear with me. It's to just set up what we're about to talk about. So what is innovation? I think it was spoken about earlier. Essentially, it is new ideas, creative thoughts, and new imaginations. Very importantly, innovation is not just about technology. What we're going to be talking about today in the VISTARA context is not about technology. Lately, it has become synonymous with technology, but innovation just means creative new ideas. What is our challenge at VISTARA? We are a small airline. We just have 4% market share in India. We're based largely, our operations are largely out of Delhi, in and out of Delhi. We don't have much access to slots in Bombay and other places because the airports are really full in India. And we are 1/10 the size of the market leader, which is over 40% market share. How do you then attract attention and get customers to fly you? The only way to do this is you have to punch above your weight. You have to get noticed. You have to differentiate. And it's through differentiation-based disruption that VISTARA has become visible and has become meaningful, we believe, to customers, and we'll show you what we mean by that and why we believe that. It's not enough to just for management or for a team of people to say, let's innovate, let's ideate, and all these lovely buzzwords. Eventually, the front line has to be motivated to deliver whatever it is that you're promising. The disruption that you're promising, the difference that you're promising has to be delivered by the front line. Therefore, we need to make sure that whatever innovation we talk about in communication, in experience, is something that is believed by the front line, and the front line has a passion and is engaged sufficiently to deliver, and we'll get to that. The goal for VISTARA is to make people look forward to flying again. What we basically, the insight we landed on is that flying has become a chore. People don't look forward to it anymore. It's a pain in the airports, crowds, lines. Getting on the aircraft is like getting on a bus. It's just something that has become a drudgery, really, to go through. And we want to make flying something that you can actually look forward to again. Like you used to when you were young, when we all grew up, at least when I grew up in the 70s, people would dress up to fly. People would look forward to it. It would be a special occasion, and we want to bring that back. And in bringing that back, we want to make our customers pay a reasonable premium to fly us. We are a full-service airline, which means that we can't or we should not match the fares of the low-cost carriers. We'll be out of business. If every time all our fares matched what the LCCs charge, we'll be out of business. So we need to be able to extract a premium, a higher fare. We want to do that through differentiation by wanting you to choose us because of the experience. So the focus today is going to be on four aspects on which or four examples in which we used differentiation and innovation to drive the message and to drive engagement. Number one is the video you saw, the VISTARA Retrojet. I'll talk a little bit about that. Why did we do that? Number two is something which some of you, or many of you I'm sure are very familiar with, this concept of a third place. This was made famous by Starbucks' Howard Schultz, where he said that Starbucks was created to be a third place, first and second places being the home and the office. A third place where people can go and either relax or work or just be comfortable in a surrounding that is conducive to them just feeling at home. So the third place is what we want to create also on board our aircraft. And we'll get to that, how we want to do that. And the third example of what seems common sense, but what has been really disruptive in the Indian market, is a principle that we have in VISTARA called the human decency principle, which means treat our customers like you would want to be treated yourself. don't make money out of a customer's misfortune. Customer shows up 1 minute late for the flight, aha, caught you, buy a new ticket, you don't get a refund. We wanted to change all that. And then finally, how do you get the frontline staff to deliver your promise? How do you create the fire in the bellies to go beyond, above and beyond? So the Retrojet, you just saw the video. It's been a huge success for us. It has actually become a brand ambassador, and the crew in the retro uniform has become they've become almost like fashion icons now. The kind of coverage the Retrojet has got, these special flights we fly, one is tomorrow, have got, they're worth their weight in gold, better than any advertising we could have done. Now, there's an audacity behind with VISTARA doing a Retrojet. A Retrojet is normally done by airlines who have been around for 50, 60, 100 years. They basically paint their aircraft or some of the aircraft in the old color schemes or liveries. British Airways has just done that. They've brought back the BOAC color scheme and various other things to basically to remind people of the glorious heritage of the airline. VISTARA is just 4 years old. How did we come up with a Retrojet? Well, what you already saw was we may be 4 years old, but we carry the DNA and the heritage of the very first airline in India, Tata Airlines. Tata Airlines, as many of you know, was founded by JRD and went on to become Air India. Unfortunately, the Tata connection with Air India over time reduced and eventually became zero as the airline was nationalized, government-owned, government-run, and Tatas were, Mr. JRD Tata himself ran the airline for at least 20 years after it was nationalized, but then was eased out by the government. And Air India, according to as far as the Tatas are concerned, Air India is no longer their creation anymore. Air India has become something else. So they want VISTARA to reclaim the true aviation legacy of Tata Airlines. They founded aviation in India. VISTARA is the reincarnation of what JRD Tata had created, India's very first airline. And therefore, we have the right to paint one of our aircraft in the colors of the very first airline in India. We're 4 years old, but we carry the legacy of India's oldest airline. We also, I think a key part of communications is not to take yourself too seriously. So when the 10-year challenge happened, this whole meme went around a couple of weeks ago. 2019, you see the image below. 2009, we were just a dream, like a child's dream. So while we want to carry the heritage and the legacy and everything, we don't want to take ourselves too seriously. So our social media post for the 10-year challenge was this post on the right side. A child wondrously looking at the sky, dreaming of something, an airline, and the airline today. We were just a figment of a dream 10 years ago. The Retrojet has actually not only caught the imagination of customers, but there was a global aviation conference organized by the Ministry of Aviation about a month ago in Bombay, the first of its kind, where people from all over the world were invited, those related to aviation, so whether it's regulators or airline management or whoever it is, suppliers. And this conference was actually, the airline partner was not us. I won't name who it was, but it was some other airline. Some event sponsors were also other airlines, not us. We were just not very involved in this event because we're too small, and we said, look, we'll come for it, but the sponsorships were given to others or taken by others. A week before the event, the ministry called us up and said, would you mind showcasing your Retrojet and having your crew do a ramp walk? Now, some of you may wonder that why we're using crew for ramp walks, etc. That's a different discussion and debate. But the point I'm trying to make here is, in front of a global audience, where VISTARA is the smallest airline in India, smallest major airline in India, we were invited by the Indian government to actually showcase because they are so proud of what VISTARA stands for. And because VISTARA has become such an eye-catching icon of Indian aviation, we actually stole the show by having a crew. I won't show you the video, but by showing the AV that you just saw and by having the crew basically, demonstrate or display the uniform. And it was astonishing. We did this in 1 week, and this is another example of disruption and communication to disrupt, using brand imagery and ideas to just change the way people think about aviation. So the retrojet gave us a platform not just for the aircraft to be painted differently and the crew to wear different uniforms, but it's created a platform for us to actually create a series of buzz-creating customer activations. So for example, on Valentine's Day, we had a special retro flight, and we had a contest prior to the flight where people were asked to name their favorite love song and to record a video dedicating the love song to somebody. Got tremendous response, and we gave free tickets to the best submissions. But it has just created a platform which is very extendable. It has allowed us to use imagery, which is going back to the olden days, and to bring back what we hope is the glamour of flying. So this kind of imagery is something that I don't think in the aviation world has been seen for a long time. It used to be quite common in the 60s. So we're trying to bring that back. Our crew in these uniforms only fly in these uniforms only about once in a few weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, because we want to keep it special. The next one is tomorrow on Women's Day. The kind of coverage we received, these are images from our Valentine's Day retro flight, and you can see from the expressions, just the photos out there, the entire experience is different. And the kind of coverage this is getting us, full-page articles, this is from the Telegraph, Calcutta, again, worth its weight in gold. It's disrupted the way airline brands communicate about their business in India, and it has caught the imagination of mass media in a way that is paying us back multiple times of the investment we put into it. Okay, now moving on from the retrojet, I want to talk about other aspects of disruptive differentiation that we have introduced in the airline. This thing is not very sensitive. The third place I talked about, like the Starbucks, like a home away from home. It's a place where you can relax, and a boarding and landing music, some of you may have heard it, is designed to make you feel good. It is designed to actually appeal to the senior corporate leaders who may be today in the 40s, 50s, maybe 60s, who grew up to some of the classic soft rock of the 70s. So we have tracks by softer tracks, we don't play hard rock, by Pink Floyd, by Steely Dan, by art, and the kind of feedback we get, whether it's on social media or emails or whatever, is, oh my God, we can't imagine that an airline is playing Shine On Crazy Diamond. We were approaching Bombay for landing, and Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World came on, what a wonderful way to arrive. Osibisa's Welcome Home. So it's really hit our TG, and it has been such a change from either the piano music you hear on certain airlines, those standard boarding elevator tunes, or the Shanghai music you may hear on some other airlines. And, example of a tweet, when VISTARA welcomes you to Mumbai by playing What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong, you flew with the best. I mean, these little elements, we aim to think through every aspect of the customer experience. And the innovation comes from challenging the conventional wisdom in every aspect and saying, let's do it differently. Let's do it different. When we first proposed that we would start playing soft rock, blues, jazz, etc. on our flights, there was a mixed reaction from our management team and even from the board. Oh, will there be words to the music? Or can we just keep it instrumental? And those of us who are proposing the idea is to not just have instrumental music. The idea is to evoke emotion and passion, memories, because music, after all, is a soundtrack to our lives. Other examples of the ambience we've created, we have the way we lay out our food, the way we design our menus, etc. It's like the good old days of flying. They're just examples of the kind of ambience inside the aircraft. I think either the battery is very weak or it has stopped working. Can somebody help me, please? Where do I point here? Okay. So again, just our brand differentiation comes not just from the music and the ambience, but if you notice the picture on the right, our crew They kneel down to speak to the customer, and that is something we insist on. That's something which has come from the heritage of Singapore Airlines, that every little aspect and interaction must be done in a manner that is visually distinctive, and which is classy, and which is the way it used to be, when flying was not a chore. We've got mood lighting on our aircraft. The lighting tones can change. Right now, in this picture, it is light orange. But depending on the time of day, depending on the cabin class you're in, lighting changes. And the idea is when you board an aircraft in the evening, the lighting is light purple. It's like getting into a jazz bar or a club. You've got Louis Armstrong playing, you've got light purple lighting, you've got crew either in this uniform or the standard uniform. And the feeling we're trying to invoke is, I've come to a nice place where I can relax. One of the comments we get is, these are actual comments in quotes. We feel like we're on an international flight. We actually dress a bit better when we fly VISTARA. That is the kind of thing we're trying to do. People used to dress up to fly earlier. We've got wireless streaming in-flight entertainment, and the content is like an international airline. So even though we're domestic, even though people are saying the only thing that matters domestically is airfare and nothing else and blah, 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 we're doing things differently. See, that gentleman dressed up for this retro flight. We sent out a message saying, special retro flight, please dress in your retro best. This gentleman showed up wearing a nice old-fashioned hat. And these flights become events in themselves. Amit was, coincidentally, as I said, in one of them. And he can speak about that during the breaks, I'm sure. Okay, so very quickly moving on to the third example of disruption or differentiation is whether it's in the Bible or in the Gita, there's always a concept of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that is a simple principle, the golden rule that we brought into VISTARA. Example, basically the staff have been told, do the right thing and never profit from someone else's misfortune. So this was summer last year. There was a road accident on NH8 nearby. And we just put up this tweet because our crew were getting stuck in the traffic as well. And said, look, there's heavy traffic congestion due to road accident impacting both crew and customers. We will accommodate customers who miss their flight on a seat available basis on the next flight with no additional fee or fare. And this went viral. I had taken the snapshot when it was 935 likes, eventually ended up with more than 10,000. And people, the kind of comments it generated, we can't believe an airline is proactively doing this. Wow. And then in the next 3 to 4 hours, every other airline put up a similar tweet. And it's the first time ever that in India, you had airlines not nickel and diming you, not making you miserable for showing up late, for actually saying, we'll take care of you. So instead of a race to the bottom, we started a race to the top for once. And now every airline is trying to outdo each other and saying, we'll take care of you. Because they know if they don't, we will. And we're very proud that we have managed to change the mindset from screw the customer to the customer is the reason you exist and take care of them. The human decency principle can take many forms. It's not just help the customer when he's in trouble, but just do the right thing for the customer like you would in your own home. This comment is from Veer Sanghvi, noted journalist, a couple of weeks ago in the Hindustan Times. He says, I try not to eat on planes, but when it is a long flight, I take my own packed food. I flew from Bengaluru to Delhi on VISTARA and got the Gardenia, the ITC hotel, to pack me a biryani. When the hostess asked me what I wanted for dinner, I responded that I had my own food. Let me at least heat it for you, she said. She took the biryani away and returned with a beautiful plate of warm biryani served restaurant style with raita, pickles, papad, etc. No in-flight service has ever been so thoughtful. So this is another example of human decency, which is just go above and beyond and do the right thing to delight the customer, to take care of the customer. And the kind of response it gets, small acts, but tremendous goodwill is generated. So finally, on the very last bullet point, how do you get the front line to do this? How do you get them to get a fire in the belly, to develop the passion, to go above and beyond? It is by getting them engaged, having them feel that they're all part of this one, it's not a cult, but one mission together. And we do all kinds of things to engage the front lines. For example, again, as a part of the 10-year challenge, we asked all our frontline staff, this is cabin crew and ground staff, send us your 10-year challenge pictures. And we say it doesn't have to be 10 years, it can be 10 plus years. So people sent us baby pictures, etc. So pictures of then and now. And the kind of connect it created within the company where people say, wow, that's how you used to be and blah, 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 how cute, whatever it is. But instantly, everybody became one big family. It didn't cost us anything, right? But this is the kind of thing we do to make everybody feel like they're one big family. We're all in this together. And Vistara is a family, and our customers, when they get onto our aircraft, we need to treat them like we would treat people at our own homes. We don't use the term guest. We say customers. We feel the word guest has been overused, but we treat them special. We also use certain motifs for internal bonding. Behind the scenes, we have a crew do fun stuff, the dab, etc. But the external visible motif we use is, again, I'll walk closer. Well, this is SpiceJet. The idea, the reason I put this up here is I was earlier at SpiceJet, and we were going through a very, very difficult time, like Jet is going through today. And we created this motif at SpiceJet called With All Our Heart. It was actually a rallying cry to the crew, to the staff as well, saying that put your heart into it. The survival of the company is at stake. And it was a promise to the customers. So this motif idea has started back then. And well, I think we're missing one image here. OK, one image, I think it may show up later. But the Vistara current motif, we obviously don't do this because that's not our motto. But we have a motif that we use in all of our, many of our external communications and internal events to create a similar bond, and the last slide will have that. Another example of how we created engagement within our crew and with customers is we put up this simple social media activation, which is match the crew to the baby picture, right? And this humanized the crew. They're not just mannequins, they're not just these people that, are there on the aircraft magically to serve you. They're actually people, humans like just the rest of us, and they have interesting pasts. And the amount of engagement this generated was amazing. And let me just answer. Easy one to answer was Sering, who is that one, number 4. B is, I'm forgetting, I think B is number 8. C is number 3. D is the only guy, 7. E is 5. F is 1. G is 6. And H is 2. So we created this social media activation, and hundreds of responses came in, and we gave the first correct response free tickets. So that was the way we announced the winners. So first correct response in each of the 3 major social media platforms got the prizes. And this is the same 8 crew. So just in conclusion, what does all this add up to? Now, despite being a tiny airline, 22 aircraft, 4% market share, we are proud and humbled and privileged to be we are India's most highly rated and most highly awarded airline. Just in the last year, in 2018, we won the best airline in India, and in some cases, the best airline in the region, Southeast Asia or Asia. From Skytrax, from TripAdvisor, Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, Smart Traveler, so on and so forth. And then we were also voted one of India's 20 most respected brands in 2018. And we're tiny, we're just 2,000 people in the company. And so we're very proud and humbled, but we know that we need to maintain and keep raising our standards. So this last slide is what I tell the team when I speak to our staff in gatherings like this, that sustaining the culture behind the brand is critically important, and we must always guard against certain things. We must guard against a chalta hai attitude and a lack of attention to details. I think what has held India back the most is our chalta hai attitude. These things happen, doesn't matter, not a big deal. And chalta hai means you don't care about the details at all. You do the whole road, you don't put up proper signage. Yeah, stuff like that. So this is not a routine 9 to 5 job. It's not time pass, and chalta hai we have zero tolerance for. If somebody displays a chalta hai attitude, and doesn't fix it, he or she will not remain at VISTARA for long. Second is lack of passion and lack of sense of urgency, lack of ownership. Assuming someone else to do the job. Yeah, everyone's a boss, no one's a worker. And that is again something that is, I think, held India back. Where the actual job is done by the newest or by the trainee or somebody who's not really qualified, while the bosses make all the presentations. But we out at VISTARA say, look, you have to take ownership and make sure the job is done, and don't just delegate down to the lowest guy on the totem pole. And if you can fix that, you can create miracles. The third golden rule that we tell them is lack of consistency, not following procedures, is a problem. It's better to be consistently good than to be occasionally great and occasionally terrible. So just being consistent is extremely important in our business. Number 4 really gets me upset. Slow, delayed responses, or saying not possible without really trying. And that is so common. You ask somebody, can we do this? Answer is not possible. Why is it not possible? They're doing it, they're doing it, they're doing it. Why is it not possible for us? Have you even tried? Number 5, the MAFA syndrome. Mistaking articulation for action. We made the statement, job done. We announced the plan, job done. No, job hasn't been done, job has just started. But again, we as a country suffer a lot from the MAFA syndrome. We make these claims, in 50 years we'll be bigger than the US. Congratulate us now, bigger economy. No, we are not there yet. You have to get there. In aviation, we say in 20 years we'll be the biggest domestic market in the world. Yes, but where are the airports? You can't even handle the traffic today. So let's get real rather than just live in the dreams about what we will be in theory. Another version of MAFA is NATO, no action, talk only. Yeah, so these are things you have to guard against. And most of all, we internally have to guard against taking our early success and accolades for granted, because as someone once said, the best way to hide your laurels is to rest on them. We cannot afford to get complacent. So thank you. This is the motif I was referring to. This is the takeoff. Yeah, so every time we have a frontline graduate from training, these are new joinees, this picture is taken in the training center. And these are all little elements to create the bond, to create the culture. Thank you very much. Yeah. Was I okay on time?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjiv. May I request you to please just take a seat here. I now call upon Arun Sudaman, Editor-in-Chief of the Holmes Report, to join Sanjiv on stage.
Hi, Sanjiv. Thanks, Anubhati. And thank you for that really interesting presentation. Thank you for displaying your laurels up here on stage. It struck me that many of the examples you used to showcase innovation, and you didn't actually mention this week's one, came out yesterday.
I was hoping you'd ask.
Yeah, well, perhaps you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that's another simple idea which has really resonated.
No, absolutely. So yesterday we announced through a press release that we're going to do something that I'm sure many of you will assume, how come that's not been done all this time? We announced that we're going to carry sanitary pads on board for customers. Honestly, when this idea first came up, and it came up through our corporate communications team, which is one of you within VISTARA, my first reaction was, don't we have that already? I mean, we carry medical kits with all kinds of stuff in it, fancy stuff. We don't carry sanitary pads, and apparently no airline in India carries these. So we said, okay, I mean, that's a no-brainer, we should do it. But what really caught us by surprise is the reaction, because we just issued a statement for Women's Day, because tomorrow we're having a retro flight, which we always announce before, and it's Women's Day tomorrow. And so we issued a release which says that, by the way, we're going to be launching sanitary pads on board tomorrow. And it went to national media, TV news. So it just, I guess it is an example of small things making a big difference, and just sort of doing things that should have been done a long time before. It's not rocket science, but just do the right thing. and use your common sense. Yeah.
Now, what struck me with that example
Yeah.
and with some of the others you mentioned, for example, you look to the history with the retrojet, whereas for many companies, innovation often means a kind of slavish focus on the future. The music, there was some concern about the words. Many companies would perceive the sanitary pad strategy also with, for whatever reason, with some concern. So it seems that the common thread here is that you're willing to take on an element of risk with some of these initiatives. And how important is that when it comes to innovation?
I think it's absolutely important, critical. If you don't innovate, if you don't take a step forward, you won't stub your toe, but you won't move forward either. So there's always a risk when you're trying to move that you stub your toe, but you must take the risk. We take calculated risks. We push the envelope. We certainly challenge the traditional boundaries, but we don't go crazy. I mean, I'm so tempted to give examples of what I consider people going crazy, but I won't.
Please.
But we do, no, I won't. But we take calculated risks, and we keep, there's an analogy called boiling a frog, right? When you boil a frog, you keep raising the temperature. Frog is alive. Very gradually, and the frog doesn't know that the temperature is rising because each change is so gradual. Eventually, the poor guy gets boiled to death. Now, we don't want to kill anyone, but what we're doing basically is boiling the frog, where we are incrementally making small changes in various aspects of what we do, so that today we're a completely different airline actually than we were 4 years ago when we started. When we started, we were a very traditional airline. Obviously, with a parent like Singapore Airlines, the first thing you do is you emulate a parent. So our crew were very formal, very tight buns. We didn't have any of this kind of rock music or whatever on the aircraft. No mood lighting, very traditional advertising. And we've been boiling the frog. And today, in 4 years, we've become a very different airline because our crew are young. Customers have a certain life experience. And we wanted to create a certain differentiation. We realized after the first couple of years that, look, there's no point in being a clone of Singapore Airlines when there's another airline in India, Jet Airways, which also models itself on Singapore Airlines. We have to differentiate. And so differentiation became a focus. And we would tell our shareholders, we would tell our parent companies, both Tata and Singapore Airlines, that, look, we want to make you proud, like any child wants to make their parents proud, but we want to do it our way. We don't want to be a copy of you, but we'll make you proud in our way. And I think our parents, fortunately, have both kind of looked at us as this slightly worrying child, but has given us the leeway, the freedom to do that. And thus far, it has worked well. Yeah.
Indeed, a good parenting strategy as well. Does that attitude towards risk-taking extend to your communications as well? Because it struck me that the tone with which VISTARA engages with customers is quite human for a corporation. And sometimes companies prefer to be a bit more stuffy, a bit more formal.
I think you're absolutely right. I personally am involved in, I think, majority of the communications that goes out of the company, whether it's through advertising, through press releases, or whatever. As Ronit will tell you, Ronit is in our PR and communications team. Every time a draft comes to me, I rewrite most of it. But now I'm rewriting less because I think Ronit and team and the PR agency have gotten a hang of what works. Words like esteemed and privileged, etc., I see red when I see those. I say those are stuffy, old-fashioned words, right? So we don't want to use those words. We have a phrase which actually is very meaningful called intuitively thoughtful. But we used to use that phrase in every communications. As another example of intuitive thoughtfulness towards our esteemed customers, I say, oh my God, I die of boredom if I was to read this press release. So we've kept it very simple, direct, and approachable. Mm-hmm. So all our communications is actually told in a very simple manner that the other person doesn't feel that this is PR talk or this is corporate talk. This is just simple communications, and we want to keep it simple.
Do you think that reflects a changing dynamic between customers and companies? Because I think for many people, they're almost used to being talked down to by companies who are kind of big and have lots of money. But nowadays, especially with the advent of social media, it feels like customers are on far more of an equal footing.
No,
with
you're absolutely right. I
corporates?
think social media is contributing a little bit to this. When a customer either complains or compliments you on social media, you have, fortunately now, 280 characters to respond to on Twitter. So we need to keep our responses also polite and direct and to the point. And that style is actually very effective, I think, with the customers. We don't have the luxury of using flowery words in those responses. And that has come across in all our communication, which is simple, direct, polite, and easily digestible by the customer. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a fair amount of research out there which suggests that when companies talk about innovation, customers often don't necessarily see it as innovation, but they see it as another way by which a company is trying to extract more money from them, a way to increase their kind of product, revenue per product. How do you prove to people that actually all of these innovations are about helping them?
No, like I said in my first slide, we actually do want to get a little bit more money out of them. We're in business after all. Jokes aside, the ultimate goal is to differentiate so that you can extract a premium. I mean, we're in business, we have a higher cost structure, we're a full service airline, we need to have revenues that more than cover our costs. We can only do that if you stop competing just on fare and price. If you're just competing on fares, then you'll be all at the same fare level forever. But today, if you notice, VISTARA charges and is able to successfully command a reasonable premium over other airlines. 400 to 500 rupees on average. In some cases, it can be more. Some cases, it could be less. Average is about 10% more than other airlines. And but having said that, it doesn't mean we are going to extract every dime out of the customer by any means possible. The human decency principle, where we give waivers, where we accommodate customers, we don't charge them punitive fees if it's a situation out of the control, etc., shows that we're looking at the bigger picture. We are not looking to make money through bad profits by making the customers miserable. We don't want to profit from a customer's misfortune. We want to profit by offering an experience where customers are willing to pay a premium because they know that you take care of them and they'll have a better experience with you. Mm-hmm. And that if something goes wrong, you won't screw them, essentially. Yeah.
Interesting.
That word I don't normally use in my direct communications, but I think it captures it here.
I think you're on safe ground here. It seems to me that the most difficult thing when it comes to doing things differently, compared to the market or compared to the industry, or even compared to the country, as you pointed to, is in terms of culture within your company. I mean, how hard is it to inculcate that mindset of being comfortable with the risk of doing things differently?
It's not easy. There's a lot of resistance from those who are used to doing it the old way. And I think across companies, not talking specifically of VISTARA, across companies you'll see that culture change is often accompanied by a significant amount of people change. You need to actually create a team, your next level, who thinks similar to you. And often you will find that there is a number of personal changes that take place so that you can bring in like-minded people who then support your mission to change the culture. Within my team in commercial over the last 3 to 4 years, I think every department head reporting to me is different from what they were when they started, which is not to say that the department heads who started with the airline were bad or incompetent. It was just that they had a different style and people eventually self-select, and you want to bring in people who are willing to take on these risks and challenge the status quo, essentially.
So the answer is if you can't change the mindset, you change the people.
People self-select. We would never ever terminate somebody for saying, oh, you don't think like me. Mm-hmm. But people self-select. They start realizing that, okay, this is different from what I'm comfortable with or used to. And so that is when people decide to move on. But similarly, people get attracted to the company. Mm-hmm. And the people who come in are people who say, we're really attracted to the way you guys are doing things. Mm-hmm. So self-selection happens, and I think you eventually end up with the next level, which is very aligned to the culture change you're trying to drive. And then you need to engage with the front line. Front line, you can't replace the front line. Essentially, they're the same people who were there, the crew, the ground staff, etc., the same people who were there when the airline started. We have a turnover, but majority were here when the airline started, and we kept adding more. You need to change their culture, and you change it by doing these very visible things and saying, hey, listen, we are thinking differently. We're not your father's, what was that car ad? We're not your father's Ford or whatever anymore. Yeah, we're new, we're different. Yeah.
So you have a room full of communications leaders. As a C-suite leader yourself, one of the biggest concerns for the communications function is how they kind of move up that value chain and are taken more seriously in the C-suite. What do you want from comms leaders, aside from better press release drafts?
No, actually, no, I think communication as a skill, it's a very specialized, and you don't get great communicators very easily. What we want from communicators is get our message across simply and effectively with the right timing, like we talked about earlier. We want communicators to help us also drive ideas, yeah, because communicators are constantly in communication and they're seeing what's happening out there, so please feedback, playback what's out there. Pads on board came as a result of that, as I mentioned. It came up from a corporate communications team. So it's not that only in-flight services can think of these things. Ideas can come from anywhere. But I tell you one skill which is really, in short supply is the art of just framing sentences grammatically correct. I mean, when we get ads, and we've gone through 3 agencies now, the copy in the ads, I'm known as a grammar Nazi. The commas are missing, the tense is wrong, the this and that. I mean, the word would is used wrongly. He would be there tomorrow. What do you mean would? Is he coming or not? Yeah? Say he will be there tomorrow. Or we received a letter and thank you for the same. Well, why can't you just say thank you for the letter? What is the same? So getting communicators who can talk without going into this archaic government-style lingo is also a challenge, and I think they're worth the weight in gold if you can find people who can talk simply, talk like normal human beings speak, and don't lapse into government babu English when you're trying to communicate. Yeah. I don't often speak my mind, as you can tell, but I don't have very strong views on anything, but yeah, it is a rare skill, and I think the modern generation of communicators needs to break away from the traditional style of overly formal communications.
No, actually, I think that's reflected in the way that you yourself have communicated here today. Do we have any questions from the floor? We have a couple of minutes still. Sure. Could you just wait for the mic? Thank you.
Hi, morning. Sanjiv, it was a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you.
I was tweeting also while you were discussing, and I've already got some retweets from VISTARA, so quite prompt. Okay, I used to work for a brand called Ola, and my question is around crisis, right? You come from an industry which is quite a crisis-ridden industry. There have been certain cases which happened over the last, say, one year, where some of your competitors, and maybe VISTARA was involved in one such crisis. So just wanted to understand from a communication perspective, how as a team, how as a leader, you look at crisis, what has been your strategy? And what are your, it is going to be a crisis-ridden industry. So what are your thoughts over that?
I think that's a fantastic question. I did not cover that. I should have, actually. I think it's critical, and in our industry, you're never short of a crisis. So without commenting on other airlines and how they manage or not, but the way we want to manage crisis always, and we've had a crisis. There was this Hollywood actress, Zaira, what's her last name? Zaira Wasim, right? There was an incident where she said she was molested by the passenger behind her on the flight, etc. And we have other such incidents. Our strategy is very much don't hide. Don't hide. Come out visibly in front and address the issue head on. I cringe when I see crisis situations happening outside of us, outside of VISTARA, and there's no leadership visible. There's no leadership visible. It is either silence or it is a much delayed response from the PR department with no name attached to it. That, I think, is an abdication of leadership and responsibility. So at Vistara, very much, whatever it is, even if a flight is being diverted, we don't hide it because it's diverted because of weather. I mean, what's there to hide? If there's a Zara Wasim incident, the media went crazy because, they love these kinds of stories. I was on the phone. I was not in the country, but I was on the phone within 12 hours talking to the TV news channels directly saying, look, this is a situation. This is what we know, and this is what we're going to do about it. And we kept them informed. So every possible crisis situation, senior leadership, there must be somebody from the leadership team who's designated as go in front of the camera if necessary, be visible, take ownership, and don't hide. And if you screwed up, I mean, we can screw up. We hire people from all kinds of backgrounds. If we fly to 24 cities, sometimes you've hired somebody who doesn't handle crisis very well, gets offensive with the passengers or answers back or worse, as you've seen in some cases. If you screwed up, admit it. Say that, look, we messed up. We acknowledge it. We are sorry. We will make it up to you, but no excuses. We messed up. We're sorry. I think you have to be very direct, very humble, admit it, and say you learn from it. Don't hide. And I think there's a lot of hiding going on, which is not our culture at all. We will not hide from any crisis.
Great crisis advice. So many more questions I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please join me in thanking Mr. Sanjiv Kapoor?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Anubhati?